Good morning, everyone. We're here today, leaders in the legislature and from myself and representatives of the governor's office, to announce that the budget targets, the first big gates that need to go by, a universal budget agreement that has been made. A lot of work over the course of this legislative session, but especially over the last several weeks. And I know you're just starting to get the numbers, and you'll be interested, and we'll share all we can on some of that. But I would just like to note the substance of this agreement is obviously critically important, but I think in the political age we're in, the process itself matters. A few weeks ago, at a State of the State address, no secret, I was fairly critical to the administration of President Trump and the dysfunction of D.C., but I was very careful to talk about, and the line I used was that Minnesota could write our own story. This group of leaders and their members took that challenge and came to this room with passion for their issues, ideological differences, no doubt about that, but with a respect for the democratic process and a respect for one another. Heated arguments, but done trying to understand where both sides are coming from. And I'm pleased to say that we came up with a budget that is fiscally responsible, puts Minnesota on a continued path to fiscal responsibility, making cuts where they were needed, but investing in our people in a way that we all believe, making Minnesota the best place for a family and a child to grow up in. No one got everything they wanted. There were very difficult conversations about issues that were very dear to each of these caucuses. But at the end of the day, we were able to come up to this agreement. The work will be done now by the chairs, folks who were in the room making this happen, to start putting the touches around this to put us on a path. I'm incredibly pleased that in the first biennium, we obviously, to our constitutional responsibility, balanced that budget and leave about $2 billion on the bottom line. But the good news is, in that second biennium of the projected deficit, nearly 90% of that has been erased. And I would argue, most importantly, from the position that I have been making, and I think we came to an agreement on, is that structural imbalance on the out years in certain areas that were driving cost unsustainably. We've reduced that projected structural imbalance by 45% in this first year, meaning we don't have to face the crisis at once without undermining all of those programs. So I am incredibly proud to have worked with this group of people. The care and dignity, the passion, and an understanding of these legislative leaders that are here trying to get, in this case, we have 201 legislators separated by a single vote. I don't know for certain on this, but I'm pretty sure, unless there was a tie somewhere else, this has never happened in American history where you had a divided legislature, so closely divided, at a time when we see chaos and dysfunction at the federal level, uncertainty of what's coming down, all of those things. And in a budget situation where we had some structural issues that needed to be dealt with, this group of leaders standing up here and the support they had from their chairs was able to surmount that, put together a budget, get here today where we could all sign our names on it, and a pledge to work together over the next few days to bring this thing home. So truly grateful for the work. Grateful that Minnesota sends legislators here that understand that we may have differences, but we have not succumbed to the idea that that we let dysfunction rule, and that democracy and compromise are still seen as virtues instead of vices. With that, I will turn it over to Senate Leader Erin Murphy.
Good morning. I'm Erin Murphy. I am the proud majority leader in the Minnesota Senate. We learn as children the skill and the value of compromise. And Minnesotans expect and understand that in American government and here in Minnesota, it is our job to reach a compromise with our colleagues despite our differences. And this budget represents that value. At a time when things seem so uncertain in America, we believe it is important that we put together a budget that balances into the future so that Minnesotans can count on us and the work that we do for the people of Minnesota. And we eliminate a little bit of the stress of the chaos that is coming their way in their daily lives. This budget framework invests in shared goals like education, health care, and family budgets. It prioritizes children and workers and working families across the state of Minnesota. This was not an easy budget to balance. Sometimes things that are very hard are also good, and I'm proud of the work that I have done with my colleagues here and Leader Johnson, who is not with us this morning but was in the room with us every step along the way. It is our job, and the Senate came to this debate fighting for structural balance, to reduce the deficit in the out years, and to make sure that with the tools that we have, we are investing in the people of Minnesota. This budget and the compromise represents that. It is hard and good, and I am proud of our work. Thank you, and I will turn it next to Speaker Demuth.
Good morning. It's good to be with you. I am Speaker Lisa Demuth, and with the very unusual start that we had in the Minnesota House of Representatives, it is good to be with you at this point, standing as leaders along with the governor to explain to you where we have reached targets and a direction to continue the state moving forward is a very important piece in Minnesota history. I do want to thank the governor. As Senator Murphy mentioned, the governor invited Senate Minority Leader Mark Johnson to be in the room at all steps of the process, knowing that we are a legislature with 101 Democrats, 100 Republicans, but equally tied in the state of Minnesota. I believe a number of people didn't think we could get this work done, and we have proven to this point that we can get this work done. The global targets that we have come up with today demonstrate that in this division in the legislature, so closely divided, that we have agreed to do what is best for Minnesotans, and actually making some hard decisions, but doing overall what is best. We do have a lot of work left to do, but we are leaving that to our chairs, our conference committees, and the full body to make those determinations. I'm happy to tell you that with the global targets, we are seeing the largest spending cut in state history, nearly $5 billion from biennium to biennium, and that is progress. There is movement, considerable movement looking at that structural imbalance going forward and reducing where that is at. We also know that we have made great strides in protecting the funding for non-public education. We are protecting our schools. We are protecting our students so they can learn in the best way forward. I am very proud of the work that we have done so far. Minnesotans will be able to afford their lives here. Businesses will be able to thrive and survive. And I know you're going to have many more questions and you'll hear much more, but thank you. It's an honor to be with you this morning.
Thank you, Speaker.
Well, good morning. You've seen this movie before and you know how it ends. Minnesota has divided government yet again, and we have a budget agreement. The timeline here is very similar to the one in 2019. We're 5 days ahead of the 2019 pace. We do have all female legislative leaders of the majority or tied caucuses, so maybe that's a difference. In 2019, we had a one-day special session prior to the Memorial Day weekend. It is my hope that this year, because we're ahead of that schedule, that we will be able to wrap up our work either by the end of Monday or with a one-day special session before Memorial Day weekend. At the end of the day, we did compromise across the board on a wide range of issues. We fulfilled our commitment to taking care of people in Minnesota in health and human services in terms of biennial increases from one biennium to the next. In education, you will see on the target sheet that we handed out a negative 420 in the tails, but in actuality that means we're reducing the amount that education funding would have increased from $1.8 billion to $1.38 billion. And that significant increase in education funding that is baked in is because of the work that we did in 2023 to add inflation to the general education formula, and that's now part of the forecast. I'd like to really thank the governor for his strong leadership in these negotiations, keeping us all focused on the end goal of fiscal responsibility and having those hard conversations and getting through the hard things. I also think that it's worth noting there were 4 MVPs in the room. There were about 20 people negotiating this budget, but the 4 MVPs that often don't get mentioned would be the governor's chief of staff, Chris Schmitter, state budget director, Anna Mingy, and the gentleman who had the no shenanigans handshake in February, Representative Zach Stevenson, Representative Paul Torkelson, because it was their no shenanigans teamwork that I think helped the House to be a united body for the most part in these negotiations. Certainly, as Democrats, we were allied with our Democratic colleagues on a lot of the harder issues in the negotiation, but Team House has worked through our difficulties, and I think the fact that we're 5 days ahead of 2019 means that we have learned to work together in this very difficult tied environment. So, thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you all. I would echo those sentiments and the chairs that were in there, and I do think you heard that, the moving things forward. It was, this was a hard one with hard issues, but I have to say the personalities that were in there and the dignity about the process, I think if Minnesotans do need to know that, and I think the country would be appreciative of this because it can still work. Democracy's hard, but it can still work. With that, any of us take some questions.
What was it that caused negotiations to go on so long?
Democracy, divided government, challenging issues.
Policy issues? Was it just the sheer?
Well,
numbers
I
of
would
the
let
budget?
them know, I think historically, this, as they said, is actually faster than it's been. This is pretty typical in a deliberative body. One person doesn't get to decide. So I think the pace was good. I think we set our expectations about we would go in there and get it. It doesn't work that way. Conversations that may look on paper that they were going to take a half hour took 10, 12 hours because people are so passionate about it. So I think this is pretty typical of a representative democracy and a deliberative democracy. And again, you heard all of these leaders say we are as evenly divided as any state in the history of our country has been, and here we stand with a deal.
Governor, where do you stand on some of those big issues that have been talked about for weeks? Immigrant health care, non-public school aid, those types of things, hourly school worker. Did you agree on all those things?
Yeah. Well, I don't agree on it, but I agree with the compromise on it, and I agree with the passion that's shown on the other side. I made it clear, especially I think on the health care issue, I think both economically, folks get that health care anywhere. Our hospitals tell us that. Archbishop came down from up in the cathedral to make the case on the moral side of that, but we also understand that there's a fiscal part to it. So this idea I talk about, and all of us said this, that budgets are fiscal documents and they're moral documents. And I think at the end of the day, to get a deal done, we all compromised on that. It's not about punishing people in that case.
What is the compromise? Please explain to us what the compromises are.
I'll let some of these folks say.
Specifically to that issue on the undocumented insurance for those that are here illegally, I think that is an important issue. You've heard that there is support, but there's also not support. That is an area, so providing health insurance to those that have chosen to be in our state illegally, that just started on January 1st with a projected number of about 5,700 Minnesotan, or those people that are going to actually want to be a part of that. By April 24th, it had exploded. Instead of just the 5,700, it had exploded to over 20,000 people that had joined that free health care. And that was something we looked at fiscally that could not go on. The compromise that we came to is that will need to come to an end, but we also recognize the importance of allowing that care for children that are here. That is part of the compromise that was raised. So adults on Minnesota Care, as undocumented, that will come to an end. Children that are undocumented, that are on Minnesota Care, that will be allowed to continue. It's not a measure of being uncaring, it's a fiscal issue, and there are still opportunities. Those Minnesotans that are here, those that are here illegally, they can still join the private market. So it's not that healthcare is being denied in any way. But that was one of the big conversations. There's a lot of thoughts that go into that from both sides of the issue. We had to make hard decisions in that room, and when we looked at numbers and we looked going forward, this was a compromise that we were all able to come to. Any negotiation, no one walks out completely happy. Speaker Emerita Hortman and I recognized that as we got the House started multiple times in the beginning of session. No one walked out completely happy about things, but yet we have to be able to work together. That specifically on that issue is how we handled it.
What about unemployment insurance for hourly workers?
Unemployment insurance for hourly workers, we're talking about our hourly workers in school. That was a very big sticking point that we looked forward to. The education bill in the House of Representatives has been delayed almost 2 weeks, specifically because of that issue that was included in the finance bill. That bill did pass out of the Education Finance Committee, out of our Ways and Means. It was calendared on rules for 2 weeks ago on the 2nd of May. That bill will be heard tomorrow. That includes that includes unemployment for hourly workers that will sunset in 4 years. We've heard from our schools across the state that that is not unaffordable. It's a reminder, though, the people that are hourly workers knew that they were signing up for those jobs, and so it's not a question of whether or not they were unemployed. That is just when that portion of their employment ended. It is very easy, though, for schools to offer additional jobs throughout the summer should they want that. That will be ending if we can hold that through in the conference committee, but that is the stance right now. That was not a part of the agreement that we're talking about, but that was an issue of great conversation. That'll go through in conference committee, and we'll see where it actually lands.
Yeah, let me add on.
We're divided in the House, so now you're going to get to the other side of the
Right.
debate in the room.
So the sunset on hourly school worker unemployment insurance is in the House bill. That will go to conference. That will not come back from conference. When we pass the education bill off the Minnesota House of Representatives floor, that provision will be in there. The bill will pass most likely tomorrow. And then we will also pass a bill that fully funds unemployment insurance for school hourly workers in the first biennium. And that will be a bill that will pass right following the E12 bill. I'd also like to just comment briefly on health care for undocumented Minnesotans. Undocumented people who are in Minnesota are people. They are Minnesotans. They are deserving of care. They pay taxes. They contribute to our economy. And this health coverage that they have received has provided life-saving cancer treatment, life-saving diabetes care. And so this budget agreement will end that health care for those individuals as of December 31st, 2025. We go into that eyes wide open, that this will change people's lives, in some cases substantially for the worse. But it is a compromise, and under the compromise, we will be funding state government in the state of Minnesota. State government is finite, and we make these choices. But to preserve the functioning of state government, to preserve health care for everyone else being delivered when it should be delivered and how it should be delivered, we did make this compromise with the Republicans.
Speaker, did you step forward earlier, Speaker Emeritus Hortman? Oh, do you want to talk about that first?
Do you mind?
Yeah, that's fine.
I really appreciate it. I know you've got lots of questions. First of all, I am sorry that Mark Johnson isn't here with us this morning, and it was through our Wednesday morning walks that we decided together that he would join the room. So he was there because I wanted him there. We invited him, and we will continue to do our work together. But that's something we started early this session in power sharing. Just want to be really clear about that. Speaker Hortman was really eloquent on the issue of the care for Minnesotans who are undocumented. They are people who live and work in our communities across the state. They are taxpayers, and they will continue to need care. And care providers like myself and others will provide that care. It just won't be reimbursed. So when we think about this as a fiscal issue, this is pulling a thread from an already very tenuous healthcare system, especially in rural facilities. But more importantly, and this is a compromise and we have agreed to it, but I have spent most of my career in the legislature working on healthcare and coverage for people. It's a very difficult decision, a very difficult moment for the members of our caucus. One other issue that I just wanted to highlight for everybody is the issue of reinsurance. We reached a conclusion on that as well. We will no longer pay out of the general fund for reinsurance. We will pay for 2 more years of reinsurance. The first year out of the Healthcare Access Fund in the premium subsidy account, and in the second year we will establish a premium across the HMOs and health plans, the health insurance payers. They will pay for the reinsurance going forward, and then beginning in 2030, there'll be a tax credit for those payments going back to the insurance companies. So we've taken this off of the general fund, which we thought was very important. We are putting more of the responsibility back into the healthcare system to, as we do, contain the costs and growth of costs in the healthcare system. And that is the way that we are continuing to both subsidize and support what is the stable individual market.
Speaker Demuth, if I could have you address, we heard Speaker Hortman talk about the fact there's a lot of history made, a lot of firsts, but the governor being surrounded by all women up there, that's never happened in decades that I've seen.
That's what we've done.
Yeah, can you talk about the value of that?
I really think it is, the leaders that you see up here have been chosen by our first voters and then our caucuses. And we are the ones that are equipped and charged with doing this work. So whether it is all women or more women, you know, whatever that is, again, Mary, you know I usually don't go that direction. If we are qualified, can work hard and get the job done, that's why we're all standing up here, and I fully agree with that.
I don't want to take anything away from Senator Carrie Dietzick, because I will say in 2023, it was women legislative leaders, but there was not divided government. This is the first time in divided government, and we did get done early that year.
Word of the department on the school, I'm confused by something you said. You said it'll go past the House but not come out of conference. So and you did say there's a separate bill to help schools for the next 2 years. So
That's right.
those benefits will pass the House but not the Senate. Is your anticipation it's going to stay in place? Or?
The funding for the benefits will pass the House and the Senate. The provision to sunset is a House Republican provision in the House E-12 bill. That bill will go to conference. We will have conferees who will never vote for that provision, so it will not come back.
Are there any other major areas of compromise aside from the ones we all just talked about that you guys think are worth highlighting?
You know, I think when we look at paid family medical leave, and that is something that I have spoken about, we want to make sure in Minnesota that we are taking care of our employees. We also recognize that when we are in a time of a workforce shortage across many different industries, and then the cost alone for paid family leave, it has not started yet. We've already increased the taxes once. One of the compromise that we came out of this agreement with is by reducing by 0.1% that tax for businesses. Businesses across the state, school districts, hospitals have all been concerned about what the effect of the proposed and now in-law paid family leave, how that would affect their businesses. Again, I want to be very, very clear that employers want to take care of their employees, but it is concerning with up to 20 weeks as it stands right now, and the cost, and yet employees don't understand that they're not going to get their full salary. It's a portion of it. So we couldn't, as House Republicans, we could not get enough movement on that, but we were able to get that one little bit of a tax decrease there. And so that was a compromise. We, of course, would have wished for more, but you'll hear on each topic that we all came in with our own priorities and perspective. This is a true compromise in that hot button issue.
Two other issues that aren't addressed in the numbers. One is the pensions agreement. The House feels especially good about the pensions number because there is a target in both the first biennium and the second biennium. And we agreed to work together on a bipartisan basis to increase reimbursement rates to mental health care providers, and that was an important victory.
Speaker Demuth.
Local cost shifts.
I want to hear first.
Yeah, Speaker Demuth, Speaker Emerita Hortman already kind of addressed this, but could you comment on the relative roles in this deal coming together of the negotiations between the legislative leaders and the involvement of the governor and his staff, the relative importance?
Sure. In the House, we had targets that were agreed upon, both Democrats and Republicans, simply because of the tie that we faced. And we were able to come up with our House targets. The Senate, they did their own targets, and then, of course, the governor had his target. Getting us all into the same room and talking through sometimes line by line, issue by issue. The question earlier was, why did it take so long? There is a lot of decisions that have to be made and a lot of perspectives. Areas, I think it was the governor that said areas that should have been short, took a little bit longer conversations, but we worked very well together. And so the process alone, getting everyone in the room, and now, this is only part of the process. Now these numbers go out to our committees, our chairs, the conference committees, and the work really gets done there, and then they'll be back on both floor. But it was good to have us all in the same room, hearing from some of the commissioners where we might have had questions, getting additional detail. We worked well together, and I'm very proud of the work that we did. Am I perfectly happy about it? No, and I know I'm not alone. I'm standing with other leaders here that are not happy about every part, but we worked very, very well together.
Can you talk a little bit about cost shifts to local counties, as Stearns County, for instance, plans to increase property taxes to respond to debt cuts?
I think I'll take that. A couple of the things that we have prioritized, we know that when we are moving costs and how it can impact our counties, it is very difficult. One of the things that we were able to do is secure funding for the SSIS system that counties count on. They have been coming back to the legislature year after year asking for upgrades on those systems. That is a benefit that we will be able to provide. We are also looking at potential policy changes that could give a little bit more flexibility to the counties in the way that they do their work, and that will all be worked out in conference committee. We want to keep costs low as possible, but yet services have to be deployed, and so that's kind of the way that we're working on it. I don't know if anybody wants to add anything else.
This is a good description. I understand it. The counties are saying, well, you're shifting on to us, whatever. We're required by law to deliver, for the example, on special ed services. Well, the way Minnesota does so much of our human services in this is, and this is different than a lot of states, that the state funds it, but it's carried out through the counties. The way it works right now is the state reimburses 100%. And what the speaker is talking about a little bit is that we have shifted in some cases 5% of the required costs and said you come up with this. There is nothing that says they can't find the savings in this to reduce it. And I think the speaker talked about this, we all talked about this. If you believe in a free market economy, if you believe in the ability to be able to find efficiencies, what we're saying is in many cases, the state doesn't have a say in how these programs are implemented. We simply reimburse. So I think we're making the case, and what the leader's talking about is, if we are too prescriptive and those legislators don't, or those counties don't feel like they have the ability to find those savings, we need to give them the tools to find that savings. If they can, that's where we get the reduction in costs.
Why would we not let the cost calculate?
I'm not certain of managing this.
Your sales tax proposal in this deal, that's in there or not?
It was compromised out. It was compromised out, so.
But is there bonding agreement on a bonding bill? Is that something?
Bonding is still being worked. The bonding piece on this is that usually comes afterwards. Bonding is able to come after we're able to get this piece of it.
So that would already money for, say, Excel or the Viking Stadium, but is there money in this deal for them?
Those things will come at, if there's bonding, there is no money at this time in either of those, because I think the compromise piece to get there was, we can only take so many issues, I think. I can't hear.
If I can just step in on bonding one more time, we know that needs across the state of Minnesota matter very much as far as our roads, bridges, wastewater, the things that we have to look at. And so we came up with a conservative number, but one that will allow us to get the work done. We're looking at about a $700 million effect on bonding. Our chairs, both House and Senate, have been meeting regularly. They've done tours around the state, and they are listening to our communities to develop and determine what we will be able to do. That work hasn't quite been finished yet, but we're working very hard on the bonding issue.
DFL lawmakers outside the door. What does this say about the possibility of this thing
It says
landing
we got a
safely?
lot of work to do. This is what happens. We knew that you heard this in here, the passion on this, and I'm pretty certain this is around the healthcare issue. And I'm not going to sugarcoat how difficult this was. Then these lawmakers are there. They have their voice heard. We'll vote on this. We didn't expect everybody to be happy in this. I think many of us compromised. I think Leader Demuth is going to hear some of the same, and that we compromise. So.
DFL legislative leaders, can you address just some of the tensions within your own caucuses on this issue?
Our caucus is full of immigrants and children of immigrants, and this is a deeply personal issue. They know people who are receiving medical care whose lives were saved because of access to Minnesota care for undocumented immigrants starting on January 1st. And they know that these individuals' lives are threatened by the removal of that health care. And it is personal, and it is visceral, and it is warranted.
Leader Murphy, are you going to be able to put these bills Are there gonna be delays? This is-
You know, we have a job to do. The 34 of us and the 67 members in the Senate have the job to be able to move this budget through the chambers and to get it onto the governor's desk for signature. But it is the case, as I have been talking with my colleagues, that this is a very visceral and painful issue. I'm not at all surprised. That this is the response, and I would expect that this is going to be the case across Minnesota. Now, they're human beings. They are Minnesotans. They work in our communities. They work with and alongside us. They go to church with us. They are our neighbors. And we have made a decision in a compromise that suggests that they are other, and that is something that people are going to object to.
Conversations at that time about Medicaid at the federal level being cut.
Yeah.
Was that part of some of the compromises that were made on Minnesota Care for Immigrants?
No, the question is good, and look, I'm going to address the passions. You hear them. Decisions that have to be made of funding all of state government. This issue was a linchpin issue of whether we were able to get anything done and shut down government or not. So I hear the passion. On the issue of Medicaid, that's exactly right. The cuts at the federal level, specifically dealing with Medicaid, should the budget that looks like the House is going to pass go forward, we will be back here almost without doubt to have to relook at our budget because of the impact that those cuts will make. We made the decision amongst leaders is we are in our lane with our budget, managing what we manage based on our revenues and our expenditures and balancing out for those out years. The federal government is, the 800-pound gorilla in the room. If they make these decisions on healthcare, on transportation, and on other things, it will impact us in a profound way.
One of the state prisons might be being closed. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, there was a decision made that we will be phased closing the Stillwater Correctional Facility. And the reasons on this, that is a facility that houses about 1,100 inmates. It's 111 years old. There have been constant issues around the inability to provide safety towards the staff and safety towards the incarcerated individuals. The deferred maintenance that needs to be done to keep Stillwater even operational is becoming unsustainable. So the decision was made that we have the capacity inside the existing system to be able to house those incarcerated individuals, to do so in a safer manner, and to be able to get the operating costs that make that go forward. There's a plan out there, and I believe here in about an hour or so, Commissioner Schnell will hold a detailed presser for all of you to hear the details of how that will work. Again, we have about 560 employees out there and about a 4-year phase. And the agreement was, and they were very clear, includes no early release, includes no changes to the current incarceration sentences of the folks who are there. But over the long haul, there is hundreds of millions of dollars of deferred maintenance in that facility that it becomes untenable. This has been talked about for a long time.
Speaker Demuth referenced the private school cuts. Did you reduce the amount of your proposed cuts, or are there no cuts to private school aid? Just to clarify that.
There are no cuts to non-public education as what had been proposed. And if I can say one thing on the news about the Stillwater prison, when we look at the deferred maintenance cost, as the governor said, and this would be a phased plan, recognizing the need to keep the incarcerated persons safe within the environment, and that facility is very old, and the upgrades and the deferred maintenance would be too much. So the plan is going forward. I understand there is that press conference later that will give more specific detail. Our concern was public safety for those that are both our correctional officers, incarcerated persons. All of that has been taken into consideration, and we were very supportive when we saw the plan, that there was a true plan. No early releases was an important piece of that too, so we were happy to support that.
Where no tax increases stands? That was a big ask from you from the start.
It really was. When we look at the amount of taxes that Minnesotans have faced over the last few years, we wanted to make sure that Minnesota families could afford their lives. We know that there are not across-the-board tax increases. There will be a small increase on the tax on cannabis. That is almost right-sizing it, or it was very low. We were one of the very low-taxed states on cannabis. There will be an increase there. And then on the electricity, there will be a repeal of of the electricity tax for data centers going forward. And so those were the two areas that provided some revenue, but they were easily understood. Not across the board for Minnesota families, though. That was important to us.
I'm gonna do that. And out of that, I might make a case, and I'm grateful because this was a priority in my budget. We will see research and development and R&D tax cut that will be fairly significant. The business community was adamant about it. I think the University of Minnesota, because of the innovation economy, this puts us on par with our peer states in a way that we were able to make that happen.
Can I just put changes there on the data centers? So currently, under current Minnesota law, data centers in Minnesota do not pay taxes on hardware, software, and electricity. It is only the electricity portion of the data center tax credit that will be rolled back and will in part pay for the R&D tax credit. So just want to be clear, the vast majority of the data center tax credit remains unchanged.
How much revenue does that repeal raise?
It's about 16 million in the first biennium when you combine the cost with the R&D tax credit. But Anna Mingy, the award-winning, should be award-winning state budget director, has the actual numbers.
I have lots of questions.
Hi, I'm Anna Mingy, State Budget Director with MMB. So the repeal of the data center tax exemption related to electricity generates revenue of about $56 million in the first biennium and $83 million in the tails. But as you heard, as a part of the agreement, there is an agreement around modifications to the research and development tax credit to the tune of about $40 million. So those numbers net to what you heard from the Speaker Emerita, about $16 million in net additional revenues in the first biennium and $43 million in the tails.
Dr. McGee.
Can you just put a top line number of how big this budget is, and also the total of the cuts in this biennium?
Yeah, so in the February forecast, we were looking at a $66-67 billion budget before discretionary inflation in the budget biennium. The leaders and the governor have agreed to, in the upcoming biennium, just $283 million in sort of combination of cuts and revenue increases. So we'll still be about that like $66-67 billion number. We can follow up on the exact numbers, and it's because these are top-line net targets. Some of them will fall on the revenue side, some will fall on the spending side, so depending on where those land, that'll affect the actual size of the state budget. But then looking forward into the out years, it's a $1.8 billion combination of primarily spending reductions with some small revenue increases. So that, as you heard from the governor, is about a 90% reduction in the projected negative balance that we were seeing out in the out years, and a 45% reduction in the structural imbalance.
So in next budget writing session, lawmakers will still have to find, if the projection holds, of course, on the deficit.
Yeah,
or the structural imbalance.
Yeah, if the projections hold, lawmakers will have to find about $290 million, which is a vast improvement from the $2.4 billion that we were projecting they'd have to find back in February. So, so still leaving a little bit of work, but a far cry from where we were back in February.
Governor, does this session deal include closing Stillwater Prison? Senator Housley has sent out a news release that you plan to phase out.
Yes.
Can you talk
That's
more
what
about?
this has been talked about for quite some time. I mentioned it's a 111-year-old facility, houses about 1,100 incarcerated individuals. It is grossly inadequate. It is unsafe for both our corrections officers and for our incarcerated individuals. The deferred maintenance every year is in the hundreds of millions of dollars. There's no air conditioning in it. The safety features are non-existent. And so this was a decision that was made collectively. It's not that we went into it, but trying to find savings and cuts. And as you heard, reducing that outward, the problem that's set there is 90% eliminated. The long-term 28, 29 is half, and we're still funding the things. This was a savings area. We believe, as you heard again, we have the capacity inside the system to house these individuals in the other correctional facilities, Oak Park Heights and others. And it's just, it's probably one of those moments that you needed a budget like this, and you needed a split legislature to have the will to do a big thing like this. It's a 4-year phase plan, so there'll be plenty of time with the workforce. And then, of course, as we talked about, working with the community and some of the things that goes into that, as the community of Stillwater thinks about how do they repurpose that facility or the land that it's on. There's one more.
Put out a statement.
We'll do one more. We got it. You don't want it?
Yeah, oh, sorry, I
Yeah.
do. How much work does this leave for 2027? There's so many cuts here in the next budget biennium, and it still ends.
Again,
in the deficit.
90% of that was dealt with. I think the biggest thing is setting the sustainability path. You heard us talk about it. These are issues that are vastly important to people. Disability services, we pride ourselves. We do this better than any other state, and we spend more money. After this budget, we still do it better than anybody, and we still spend more money, but we reduced it by 45%. This was about taking this in sections where we didn't cause a collapse in this, where we didn't have to cut education funding, we didn't have to cut health care in a way that was dramatic to people. So I'm pleased with this. We're leaving $2 billion plus on the bottom line this biennium. We have 290, as you heard Anna talk about. This month alone, revenues surpassed projections by 340. So as Chair Torkelson reminded us, forecasts are forecasts, and they're not always accurate on that. And looking 2 years out, but they bit off, these leaders and the administration, we bit off tackling this, clearing up 90% in the second biennium and setting us on a path to sustainability. So it was a big achievement. A lot of work yet to be, you hear it, passions. This is what happens when you compromise. This is what it means to try and work together. These leaders knew that. They're going to go hear this. I'm going to hear it. That's the way this should be done, but I am proud that this is a solid budget. It is fiscally responsible. It is pro-growth. It brought together a divided legislature in a time against a backdrop of total chaos in D.C., and they still got it done. So we got more work to do. Paul Snell will be with you before too long. They'll put that together. Numbers will go out. I will encourage all of you, work with our team, work with the staff on clarification on the numbers. But now the hard part starts for all of us of getting the legislators together, and we got to get a majority vote. So thank you all, and I appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thank you.